G'day guys, Jeff and Matt from ATP Science. We've got a personalised health summit that we're doing at the Gold Coast Convention Centre on November 2nd and 3rd. Matt, what is your personalised health summit all about?
Well, basically what we're going to do is we're going to help you find out where you're at, go through your symptom picture questionnaire, find out what your particular health priorities are.
Yep.
And then over a couple of days, we've got some great guest speakers coming from everywhere, all over Australia and the world. We've got Rich Kreider coming over, the expert on creatine.
Head of the ISSN?
Yeah, he's a head of the International Society of Sports Nutrition.
Yep.
And works with Texas University, mainly the NFL and the American military, those sort of people. So some great knowledge.
Grandfather of creatine, actually, one of the guys.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, he's a smart guy. Yep, who else we got, Matt?
Simon Hill from Plant Proof.
We got excellent, we had him on the podcast.
Fofi Van Kampen.
Yeah.
And she's doing some gardening and all that sort of stuff. We've got James Newbury, Cara Saunders. But
from
CrossFit. So what you're going to do is we're going to go through, find out where you're at, what your particular health priorities are, and then over a couple of days we're going to have all these keynote speaking, these electives, so you can go and learn about your particular strengths and weaknesses and how to take that to the next level in regards to performance.
The thing about the speakers that we've got as well too, it's a real cross section. Oh, don't forget, we've also got Liz Lambert as well too.
Ken Ware. I mean, he's capable of getting people out of wheelchairs. It's probably worth a mention.
Yeah, I mean, like the chaos theory. I mean, he was on 60 Minutes and literally have a look at some of the speakers we've got.
He's changed my life in 6 months.
So it's really going to be something that's a bit special, and you're going to be able to follow on with your own questionnaire so that when you're listening to the information, you're going to be able to effectively help to diagnose your issues or your areas and things that you want to be able to work on. So, and at the end, we're going to get all of these guys together with a big panel for a massive Q&A section. You're going to be able to break out into electives and ask questions and learn specifically about different areas that these guys are experts in. So it's something pretty different, pretty exciting, and we're looking forward to it.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. All right. Well, jump online to atphealthsummit.com. That's atphealthsummit.com, where you can actually learn more. Of course, you can always get in contact with us through Facebook, and also jump onto the website. So there'll be links there as well too. So, Matt.
Sweet. See you there. November 2nd and 3rd.
Welcome to the ATP project. Thank you for laughing over the intro there, Brooko. Look at this. We've got a fantastic day. We're going to be talking about fungus and mold today. How cool is that?
That is fun.
Yeah. And how's your eye today?
It's good.
That's good.
What do you ask?
because you had a condition before.
I had a blepharism. I had a rhythm of my blepha.
Yeah, exactly.
So I had a spasm in my eyelid.
There you go. And that's all good.
Yeah, a little twitch. So next time you get a little twitch, and instead of going up to someone and saying, hey, can you see that?
Yeah.
Because that's what I always do. I get a little twitch, and then I say, can you see it? No one can. They think I'm weird. So next time, just go, I'm actually having a blepharism right now.
Does sound a little bit rude, just a smidgen.
It's because you've got a dirty mind, Steve.
That's probably
no one else would ever be sitting there thinking, geez, that sounds rude.
But Elizabeth doesn't think it's rude, do you?
No, I'm trying to make the connection between...
Don't even justify that with a response, Elizma. It's not rude, Steve. We're talking about twitching in the eyelid.
It just sounds it. It sounds like other things that are to do with other parts of the body.
Like a what?
I don't want to say.
No, tell me. I want to know what's going through your mind, Steve. Tell me. When I say, look, let's go through this scenario.
Yes.
I'm twitching my eyes. Hey, Steve.
But John was twitching his eyes.
I'm having a blepharism.
Yeah, John said that to me before too. He was winking at me and he said, oh, sorry, I just had a blepharism. And I didn't know if it was.
That's where, okay.
It's a little bit of a worry.
Yeah, your brain, like when you think dirty, that's just some bloke winking at you.
It's funny.
That's strange.
It's funny. Right. It's funny talking about dirtying today, where we're going to be talking about all those spots that you see on the wall, black spots and weird colours. Because all these
fun in fungus.
We're going to put the fun in fungus. So we were talking about moulds today. All these really cool moulds and all these really bad moulds, and the kill your mould and ochratoxins and all these sort of spores and that sort of thing that really cause us grief, and some that really help us, can save a lot of lives. So it's a very, very weird podcast today, and researching for it has basically carpeted the table with scientific studies.
There is so much, isn't there?
There is, one going back to 1866, and you know what happened in 1966, didn't you? You know what happened back then?
What happened? Tell
Dynamite was invented.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
The hell's that got to do with mould?
Well, that's the same day that the first mould paper came out.
Whoa.
1866.
Holy segue.
Holy
segue. You had the whole of
1866
1866 to create a link. But the day that dynamite was invented,
Yep.
we published a paper on mold.
Absolutely.
Tell us about this.
Scientific paper.
Sounds mind-blowing.
It's called The Action of Fungi in the Production of Disease. How cool is that? This is when they first suggested that these little things hanging on the wall and growing in the garden cause disease. Brooko, it causes disease.
Brooko's just...
She's lost it.
I don't know what's happening here.
I don't know. We're going to 8660. Mate, that's when the rectal thermometer was also invented too.
Why did you point at Brooko then too?
Because I'm giving her scientific facts. She loves them.
Don't mix that up with your dynamite.
No, you don't. You don't want it.
Rectum, all right?
Yeah, rectum.
Bush.
The worst part about it was the inventor's name was Dr. Tom Allbutt. And I'm not joking. I am not joking. Please.
Hang on. So far at 1866,
Yep, when the action of
it's all about the all butt.
Yes.
Because you can do dynamite.
dynamite.
You
Yep.
got rectal thermometers.
Yep.
Hang on, when did they invent the oral thermometer or the underarm thermometer? If the rectal one come out in 1866,
Well, that was the one where they
hopefully after it.
hopefully after it.
Before. Well, what I don't know.
Hopefully they had
Hopefully
different
it's just
ones.
a different thermometer.
Yeah, different thermometers. Yeah, you don't
You
want
should wash it in between.
very, very well. You're washing
And don't
it.
mix it up with your dynamite.
Exactly.
Now let's get back to the mould.
The mould, because mould. This was the first paper by Tilbury Fox, MD, who came out and said
Hang
that
on, what happened to all butt?
Allbutt invented the thermometer.
Oh, don't point at me like that.
I'm trying to give a description of the
How long
thermometer.
is your thermometer?
Why do you ask?
You like... Anyway, carry on.
But this is when the first science.
It's scaring me. You're pulling out these big hand gestures of giant thermometers.
Here's an actual copy of that scientific paper. Look at the colour of the paper back then.
I can see that.
It's awesome, and it showed that they actually suggested that maybe this fungi stuff causes diseases. And it caused lung diseases, and that's where they said, they related it back to Chinese medicine, how damp heat caused lung disorders, all this sort of stuff. And this was the first scientific paper that actually said that these guys actually cause disease.
Yeah, wow.
Isn't that amazing?
That is in 1866.
1866, when dynamite was invented by
Allbutt.
the.
No, he did
No.
the rectum.
Yeah, it was actually. Have you heard of the Nobel Peace Prize?
I have heard of that.
It was the dynamite was invented by Dr. Noble.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so the Peace Prize
Bloody
is named
hell, you
after
know
the
some
inventor
weird
of dynamite. I know, it's useless shit though.
No, it's good.
Oh, okay, it's good
Fills up
stuff.
half it. Look, we're
Yeah.
5 minutes into a podcast.
Can I tell you, that's when in 1866 is a very famous year for eyes, when they discovered there were two types of receptors in the eyes, one for colour and one for black and white.
Really?
Rods and cones. That was another 1866.
What a fantastic year.
Seems to have been a
Steve was
great
also
year.
born
I was
in 1866. Which is why he knows so many facts about this interesting year.
Yeah, I was there. I knew Allbutt personally.
Yeah,
So,
I bet you did. All of them.
Oh my God! But that's when this whole thing came to fruition, and he only questioned it. He said the action fungi. It was a famous paper, and it was released, and it causes disease. So before then, they went, "Oh well, you just got sick. Who knows why? You just got it."
Yeah. Well, they would have been used to bad smells too. I mean, back like the musty, because a lot of the way when I'm reading through these papers, there's two different ways they want to screen people to see if they're likely. They basically say, can you see mold or something in your house, or can you smell it? So back then, everything would have been kind of moldy and smelly, I suppose. Hygiene was a big issue and not understanding.
Exactly, because smell was the cause of disease, which is
way back before all that.
Yeah.
When they used to gather up into groups and everything like that for ceremonies and churches and that, they always used to burn incense. And myrrh and frankincense were really common ones.
Yeah.
One of the cool things about myrrh in particular is the smoke from burning myrrh can actually penetrate even into wood grain and break up biofilm and kill off fungus and mold and all that sort of stuff as well. So there was little strategies, and we were talking about before, there's like weird little things in cultures and traditions that people do. In Australia, we tend to take a lot of what we like from other cultures and not take on the weird shit that people have been doing for thousands of years and don't understand why, and it tastes bad or it's awkward. And then you find those things is where you get the real magic, Like you get the frankincense and the myrrh. We were talking before about Peking duck, for example, the red yeast rice that they used to ferment the rice to make it go red and everything like that to coat the Peking ducks and that. I don't think that was necessarily just to make the duck red. Like they might have had all these other health benefits and noticed that over time you get less cardiovascular disease eating those foods and that sort of stuff when it's coated in this red stuff they make,
Yeah.
Red mold,
And then that red yeast rice or red mold becomes the original, or not the original, but it was a form of the medication. and that sort of
Lovastatin.
stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, it contains high levels of lovastatin. So do a few other mushrooms and all those sort of molds and a few other fungi, and that inhibits the 3-hydroxy-3-methylglucoquinone reductase enzyme that reduces cholesterol, and it's one of the biggest selling drugs in the world today.
Yeah, so that's that HMG-CoA reductase inhibitor.
Right.
That's the same as all your statins. Huh?
Statins,
Are they all doing that? They all work. The same mechanism?
There are other classes of cardiovascular drugs like nicotinic acid, which reduces triglycerides and that. That's a form of vitamin B3 that can give you flushing. And then, of course, they had the fibrates, which work slightly differently. They reduce those numbers slightly and the triglycerides.
Yeah.
And then the statins came out and really reduced those things. Have really bad side effects, but, they do reduce the LDL cholesterol.
So that's crazy. So there's a long history of us realising that, these mould and these spores and these sort of things potentially can make us sick.
Oh, yeah.
So what are we at now? So what does it do? How does it make us sick? Like what sort of sicknesses can it make us?
Yeah.
Well, it mainly makes us sick through the biotoxins or the mycotoxins that it produces.
Yeah.
So
is that the smell? Or is that what is it? What's a mycotoxin?
So mycotoxin, it's like, just like bacteria can produce lipopolysaccharides or endotoxins in our gut, so can mold produce mycotoxins. So a mold would have a bigger molecular structure, so you can actually measure for mold, but mycotoxins is the stuff that they give off, and they're tiny, tiny in size, which is why they're so hard to measure. And
so does it have to be inside? So do we have to have like mold growing inside us to release mycotoxin,
not at all.
or can we breathe mycotoxin?
You can breathe it in, so you can have
lick
mold
it off the windows and stuff.
Yeah, but you can have mold, and these mold spores anywhere in the house can produce these mycotoxins. You inhale those mycotoxins through the nasal cavities. They go and sit on the olfactory receptors, which is inside the nose, and those olfactory receptors have a direct link to the brain, and that's how it produces a lot of the neurological symptoms that we experience or that we see in people who have lots of mold issues.
So we don't even have to, you're not talking about this stuff actually having to saturate every cell of our body or something. So we don't actually have to have colonies of mold growing inside us like we might see in your bathrooms or someone's roof or whatever for it to be able to release this mycotoxin. If there's enough mycotoxin in your environment around you, you bring it all in. And you're saying it binds to the nerves in your nose, the smell, the olfactory nerves are the things that just pick up our smells.
Yep.
And that sends a signal straight to the brain that changes your behaviour or your mood. Or
creates inflammatory response in the brain.
Because I suppose that's how we know we're about to be poisoned, wouldn't it? Innately, our innate immune system, if we're likely to be about to inhale... Now, I'm watching Stranger Things at the moment. I'm a bit slow.
Season, yes.
I'm a bit slow, so I'm just... Now, all these mould spores are freaking me out thinking it's the upside downs.
That's right.
But, so you get this stuff in, and does it do it via the nerve, or does the actual mycotoxin get into your bloodstream and get into your brain, or is it done just by tricking your body into thinking you're about to be infected or poisoned, get the hell out?
It can do both.
Yeah.
So it can either just bind to the receptors and create a signaling response in the brain, which then disrupts a whole bunch of other neuropeptides.
Yep.
Neuropeptides are proteins that is involved in communication between the brain and the rest of the body. So it starts disrupting all of these neuropeptides, which includes leptin, vasoactive intestinal peptides, and a whole bunch of other ones, which then has flow-on effects to our hormones, our detoxification, our kidneys.
Neurotransmitters.
And this is the symptoms we experience. So we experience these physical symptoms, but it all comes from disrupted communication in the brain caused by these mycotoxins that we've inhaled.
And that'd be similar to other survival mechanisms sort of thing, like inflammatory, like first-line defense kind of things. Like we prime the immune system, we then prime our inflammatory responses, and we change the way our liver works, and we also change our brain. So we're not... as part of a survival response, short-term memory, concentration span, attention to detail, close vision, meditation, relaxation, study, all those things not important. A survival response would be find the horizon, gut instincts, intuition, anxieties. So does it manifest with those sort of behavioural things that get in the way of learning and that sort of stuff? That's
right, because the whole response in the body is primarily an immune response.
Yeah.
So it's again like how everything in the body needs energy. But the immune system uses up so much ATP or energy. So the body's just like, well, I'm shunting energy away from the dopamine and from this and from that. and it's all going into the immune system to
Yeah.
try and get this inflammation under control.
See, that's interesting. I was looking at, because some of the signs and symptoms to know if you're exposed to it or infected with it, a lot of allergic and inflammatory things. I even had a look at one paper where it's a big problem in China, the sick building syndrome.
Yeah.
And I was looking at in through China because I got a lot of links with atopic dermatitis, so the eczema and that sort of stuff linked in with the mold. And what they were finding is they didn't actually find a lot of IgE molecules directly associated with the mold.
Yep.
But what they found is the people that had exposure to mold had more aggressive or more IgE reactions to things like dust mites, foods,
Yes.
and everything else. So
Yes.
the way they described it in these papers is that the actual exposure to the mold, and in particular the smells and that sort of stuff of the mold, primed their allergic inflammation. So then when they get exposed to something, they're more likely to get an immune memory against it.
Yeah.
And then they reduce that.
And I think that's part of the mast cell activation syndrome as well. So
Yeah.
that's been associated with
And that's
mold
all this
as well.
new histamine stuff. So everyone's talking about these histamine reactions to foods. And so we're talking about mast cells degranulating, releasing
Yeah.
histamine and that sort of stuff. And if you think about it, I mean, across our mucosa, that's our first line of defense in regards to a flushing reaction. The big point too with immune cells, so the immune system, we've kind of got the TOPA1 that's designed to deal with, that's a simplified term, but the TOPA1s are designed to engulf and remove little things. So when it's a spore, then they can engulf it and try to kill it. But as soon as it gets these hyphae and these arms and legs and becomes like a moldy colony, you can't engulf and remove those. They're too big for the immune system.
Yeah.
So we have to do a chemical attack, which is a flushing reaction, which is like histamine reactions and those sort of detoxification, or those flushing reactions that might occur, systemically. So,
Just one quickly. What you're alluding to, one of the famous toxins that have been researched the most is ochratoxin.
Yeah.
Ochratoxin A, which has been found to be associated with autism.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, because what we find in there that it stuffs the neurochemistry up and increases dopamine levels in the brain.
Yeah, wow.
And so there's a paper in 2015 that showed that they've actually now linked this toxin to autism.
Yeah.
And this toxin can be found in the gut when you eat the wrong sort of foods,
Yeah.
like crappy grains and that sort of stuff. And it can be coming from the environment.
Yeah.
So we see a lot of kids with autism or behavioural disorders, we'll call them, that once they're removed from the house and they go to a summer camp or something, and they've got, your kid's fine. And then they come back at home, it's a toxic environment at home. And it's not, people
Emotionally
blame,
toxic or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and all of a sudden, no, it's really
or it's the
toxic.
bad food you're eating.
Exactly.
Now, when I had a look at the foods that are most likely to be giving you these molds, oregano, margarine, your dried herbs were the worst. 10% of all the dried herbs they tested in one study were found to be contaminated with proper levels of these particular molds.
Yeah, it's bad.
They also found there was a really high levels in fresh salad, pre-made packaged fresh salads can be really high with these molds and that sort of stuff as well. So it's not just a matter of beating everyone up over the feeding your kids colorings and that sort of stuff. Sometimes it could be these healthy foods, and that's the stuff that people don't look at. I always had that same problem in the clinic with oxalates and that. Remember, we used to you put everyone onto a good, healthy diet, and all of a sudden everything goes bad, and you're like, you got oxalate load. So these just be wary of those. So where else? What other foods? Is
Tomatoes. So
Tomatoes.
tomatoes, they use all the moldy tomatoes in commercial sauce making. So tomato sauces, tomato paste, pasta sauces. Unless you make it yourself, it's probably riddled with mold. I know, I was quite disgusted.
Hey, but so what happens if they cook the shit out of the mold? What happens if they boil
still
the
left
bugger,
with
you
the
sterilise it, but the toxins will be in there.
Yeah.
Still
Your
be there.
ochratoxins.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
ochratoxin A is one. And so it's a little bit scary. And there is a little bit of good news, because a lot of people should be able to tolerate a small amount of mold because we've been exposed to them for millions of years. But there are people who are sensitive to it.
Yeah.
Or if you're immunocompromised, you can get really bad infections and die from them.
Yeah. Or if you get a big enough dose.
Yeah,
I
big
suppose.
enough
If you're
dose.
inhaling it constantly,
It's-
because a lot of people live with this stuff.
Very much so.
Like it's and no, you're saying it's not what you can't. You got to. Most people see mold. Like a lot of people see
Yeah.
mold, and they go through and go, this stuff I'm starting to think might be bad for me.
Yeah.
By the time you're seeing it, you're inhaling, and you know
Absolutely.
you got problems because you've got paint on your walls. Behind that, they could be growing through the wood.
Yep.
They can be everywhere and hiding everywhere, and just bleaching them will take the colour away. but it won't take the mold away, will it? It'll
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
bleach them,
You've just
not
bleached
kill
it,
them.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's very important. People need to understand just painting over mold does not mean, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah, and like scrubbing it off. Like if they were to scrub it back and
Yeah.
then sand back and then prime and paint, and they go, look, I've fixed the mold issue.
Yeah,
No.
you haven't, because a lot of that penetrates into these. Like I don't know much about building, but the walls are quite porous.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it does sort of like.
Yeah, even
penetrate
more
into
so
that.
now, because they got that. They had that 7-year warranty when you get a new
Building
house.
warranty.
So they started making material to last 7 years, instead of getting material to last for a long time. So that
Right.
way, everyone has to build a new house every 7,
That's
10
right.
years.
Because
Yeah.
most molds live with water and cellulose is a material found in all woods and those sorts
Yeah,
of things.
and
it's
fibre. It's
everywhere.
just a fibrous. So all
Yeah.
your
Everywhere.
green leafy veggies, all your salads, all that sort of stuff's full of cellulose.
Yeah.
That's what you're blowing out after a salad, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and of course the the aspergillus is another really bad mold, and that's incredibly common throughout everywhere, and that can release those spores that cause.
So
all
what are the
sorts of-
main ones? The Stachybotrys is the
Yep.
Black Death.
Yeah,
That one.
that's,
That's
black
the one
one.
they talk about as the toxic black
Yep,
mold.
black
But
mold, yep.
when they say toxic black mold, it's not the one associated with. No, it's the one you'll find all through your house mainly. Hey?
Yes,
So
yeah.
they're the ones you find in between your tiles and your grout and that sort of stuff. You'll find it against the walls.
Yeah.
You find pictures of that and you'll
Very
recognise
heavy
it.
Guys,
water
I've got a
damage
horrifying
problems,
picture
yeah.
of that, but I think everyone knows that they've seen the black mold.
So I had a
everywhere.
really cool case. My first exposure to mold. My first case, really weird case study associated with mold. It was a good friend of mine. Well, he's become a good friend now. I met this guy. He'd moved from Tasmania in a really wet, cold, damp, mouldy as hell house to North Queensland because he kept having respiratory problems. Thought he'd moved to North Queensland where they got the humidity and the hot air and it'll fix his problems from Tassie, you know? But no, he goes the great life up in North Queensland, and years later, he gets diagnosed, told he's got lung cancer, a couple of weeks to live. Turned out that it wasn't. It was pulmonary hemosiderosis, which was these like traces of iron deposits that were put all through the lungs that resembled cancer on the scans. But it turned out that he was loaded up with Stachybotrys. And so we used a particular herb, Sanguisorba. We did a number of things, really, because we went and treated it. Still at that point, we're going through the differential diagnosis. Is it really cancer or is it something else? And so we're doing lots of things. But anyway, 2 weeks later, it had all cleared up. And now he's still alive now, but they decided they misdiagnosed it like they do, rather than say that someone worked out something to fix
Yeah.
someone. But that was a good one. And another one I commonly found with children, there's a mesenteric adenitis, which is it's like tonsillitis all through your gut, but it causes rank gut cramps. So it's the same thing. It's just immune burden, constant immune burden with these adenitis. It's just this immune system just catching all of these mycotoxins, any spores that might be coming through and catching them in through the lymph nodes, and it's just swelling up. It's just because we've got such a large surface area that it's no longer just isolated to the throat, that we're now getting the lymph nodes systemically involved. But bloody hard to treat, especially
Very
in
hard
kids.
to diagnose too, because these people feel fatigued, they've got achy joints, they've got swollen things. It's like, you got a virus, go away.
So how do you diagnose it?
Well, it's very
Is it
difficult.
blood or
It's
is it?
mainly through some symptom picture.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you can obviously
But what's
do.
a symptom picture? Like
Well,
inflammation and
there's-
allergies.
There's there's a lot of general symptoms
Yeah.
like fatigue
Yep.
and all of that, but there are a couple of symptoms that's like sort of like telltale signs. The
Yeah,
one
cool.
that Steve mentioned was if they go somewhere and they feel better. So every time they leave the house, they go on holiday, they feel better. They come back to the house, they feel worse.
Yeah.
So that's a big telltale sign. But then there's also like interesting symptoms like electric shocks. So people who get electric, you know when you rub your
Yeah.
feet on the carpet
Yeah,
and you
yeah,
get
yeah,
the
yeah.
little that's
Yeah.
a big telltale sign.
Oh my gosh, I'm so moldy. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's because of the VIP or the vasoactive intestinal peptide.
Yeah.
And that's because that neuropeptide generally drops in the presence of mold, and its job is for the kidneys to reabsorb water.
Yeah.
Now,
There's
if
bedwetting and that as well?
that's
I
right. So
definitely
that's
have
when you're
mold.
constant. Well, then we need to test you. We need to treat you.
Yeah.
But that will sort of like cause like water to just run through you. So you just drink water and it just flushes through you. But it
Yeah.
creates electrolyte imbalances.
Yeah.
And it's electrolyte imbalances that creates
Oh,
the
that's so
electric
cool.
shocks.
Because
So-
then one of the other symptoms that I commonly hear, and people will talk about the adrenals, so when the adrenals exhaust, I got no cortisols, I got no mineral corticoids to hold my salt into the body. So a differential diagnosis for that might be mold. So when you're looking at these, so man, what else? Is there anything? So I leave the home and I come good, I come back and I'm spaz.
You want to hear a big list of them,
Oh, yeah,
which again sounds like
not
everything.
the boring ones.
Yeah, no, they're all boring. Coughing, wheezing, stuffy nose, runny nose, red eyes, itchy skin, sore, itchy throat, and nosebleeds are the symptom of black mold exposure. And that's like every other disease under the sun, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it can get worse to persistent coughing, headaches, frequent chest colds, difficulty breathing, allergic reactions, inflammation of the sinuses, general fatigue and lethargy.
Electrocuting your children and pissing all over the place.
Absolutely, that's
But
more
usually-
exciting.
Easy.
Usually
So-
it's also people who just can't get better. So you've done everything, and
Yeah.
it's like this really hard to treat cases. Also, people are find it very hard to detoxify from anything.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is because mold biotoxins and ochratoxin A specifically inhibits or it stops the activation of an enzyme called NRF2, and I can't remember the
Oh,
name of it.
nuclear receptor
Nuclear
factor or
factor
something.
factor
So-
two.
Now,
Yes.
that's really cool. We talk about NRF2 activators all the time. So what is it? You're telling us that ochytoxin
Yeah.
blocks NRF2 activation.
Yes, it
So-
blocks NRF2. It's a couple of ways it does it, which is
Yeah.
not really important, but it blocks the activation of NRF2, and NRF2 is needed to activate or upregulate all our other detoxification enzymes, which is our glutathione,
Yeah.
our heme oxygenase 1, which is needed to detoxify
Yep.
iron, with
Yep.
iron,
Yeah.
which is probably what fits in with your case, right, with the iron deposits in the lungs.
Oh man, I'm so moldy.
So it's it's involved in all of that. So imagine if you have mold biotoxins inhibiting NRF2, which is then inhibiting all your other detoxification pathways, you're not going to be able to detox.
Yeah.
You're not going to be able to detox metals,
Now, what if I'm
environmental
taking
chemicals.
NRF2 activators, like really high doses? So, like for example, not me. I'm not talking about me, but people. NRF2 activators are really good ones. We're looking at anything sulforaphane. So all your radishes and brassicas and broccolis. We're looking at things like ashwagandha, turmeric, resveratrols. A lot of the things we could talk about
Yeah.
as antioxidants. Schisandra is amazing. Pomegranate's amazing. So if people are taking those sort of things to activate NRF2, but you've got mold exposure, will they work?
Some of them do. Like I know that the DIM or the diindole methane
Yeah.
is one of the things that they do recommend to. It was, I don't know if this is actually the way it works, but I remember reading once that it's like it kicks the mold biotoxins molecule off
Yeah.
the binding site to
Oh,
NRF2
yeah.
or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
So I thought, that would be really cool if that's what it does.
interesting.
But
Well, it
with-
does that a lot. It has a lot of DIM has a lot of effects on receptors and blocking
Androgen
receptors
Yeah.
because it's most famous as an androgen receptor blocker.
Yep.
So that's cool.
So I
man.
thought that was interesting. Now there's some other interesting things that show that if you have a diet that's very high in flavonoids, so flavonoids is what you find in coffee and in vegetables, and it's like your fruits and stuff like that. If your diet's naturally quite high in that, and you get exposed to mold and ochratoxin, mycotoxins and things like that, it will actually stop the mycotoxins from inhibiting that NRF2. In other words, it's not going to have an effect. You'll still be able to detoxify really well and all of that.
Okay.
But if your diet is low in flavonoids,
Yeah.
that's when these mycotoxins have that effect. And if you then take flavonoids because you now got mycotoxin illness, it's not going to work. So it has a protective effect, but it doesn't have a treatment effect. And this could probably explain why some people get so sick in mold environments and others don't. Because not
Yeah.
everyone gets sick when they, sure, our bodies get a bit inflamed, but some people get really, really sick.
And this
and
might
that
be
could
why
be
kids too. It might be why kids are so really predisposed to this because the children haven't had the load of the
Yeah.
flavonols and that sort of stuff. Plus, it's hard to get those things in because
Yeah.
a lot of those compounds tend to have a bitter principle to them,
Yeah.
which kids have a natural aversion to. That's crazy, man.
Crazy, isn't it?
So this ochytoxin,
Yes.
it can inhibit the NRF2 activation, which means it can slow down glucuronidation and may be linked
Yes.
into any of those estrogen disorders. Does it have any sort of effect at liberating the bound estrogen as well? Like beta-glucuronidase, do you know?
It probably would.
Because,
Yeah.
that's going to glucarate
Yeah,
things?
it's going to it's going to make those water soluble toxins toxic again, and and have them
So anything that
reabsorb
was
back into
bound
the
in
body.
the bowel and on its way out can then be liberated and reabsorbed.
Absolutely.
And that's how we can have a source of an estrogen dominant. That's why might be part of our estrobolomes that we talk about with these estrogen dominant people.
Incredible, isn't it?
That is really cool, man.
It's scary in one way because mold's everywhere,
Yeah.
and makes 25% of the biomass worldwide. It's incredible. isn't it?
25% of the
25%
biomass is mold.
Yeah, well, you think about all the jungles that's mold throughout it.
Yeah.
Again,
so
they're not.
compost is all really
compost
moldy,
is
huh?
mold,
Yeah.
and that's what compost is. So you got to remember, mold's good, bad, and ugly, and also innocuous all at the same time. It's just so many of them. It's like people. There's great people and there's bad people, and there's just different people. There's different types of mold. So it's a very diverse thing. Now, we picked on some of the bad ones, and so we should, because they can be found in your house, and about 25% of houses have some sort of
And
mold
our
in them.
foods and everything.
Definitely
so they can
foods.
be in our food. But the weird thing is they're not likely to be in the highly processed, refined foods in a nitrogen flushed foil packaging. Which people will criticise for things like autisms and that sort of stuff. I'm not saying eat those things because they've got no fungal load. But I'm just saying is just be aware that a lot of people in the clinic, it's a big thing because when people try to get good and everything goes bad, that might be an indication of the mold people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The mold people.
The mold people.
That's what we will call them now.
Well, Elisma
The
put
mold people.
put a finger on it before. Remember, flavonoids protective against mold. So most fresh foods are full of those. However, if it's a processed or aged fresh food, like some of the cold storage,
Well,
then
so
you
it
can have
takes,
problems.
didn't we say it takes 2 weeks? Wasn't the polyphenols reduced by 90%?
Yep.
So
Very
2 weeks,
unstable.
and this is fresh
Yeah.
stuff, just
Yeah.
picked nice and just sitting there. If you were to wait 2 weeks to eat it,
Yeah.
and you see at home because I got a lot of my stuff at home. It don't last 2 weeks. When you pick it ripe, it's good to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good news is mold is very temperature sensitive. So put it in the fridge, it'll be less likely to grow mold.
Oh, okay.
So that's why fridge preserves things.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's
and
also-
but moisture is a big problem.
Yeah,
Moisture's a big problem.
Yeah. So anything that's got moisture in it's likely to.
And most fridges are now in freezers. Don't remember in the old days. Well, maybe I'm a bit old here. But
You
the
are really
freezers,
old.
the freezers used to go full of ice
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
And now they don't
Yeah.
because they're dehumidified.
Yeah, right.
So that's how the new refrigeration systems work. In the old days, you'd defrost the freezer about once every month.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So I
I'd
got
have
one
to
of
do
them
it,
outside.
chip them out and everything else. It was one of my jobs.
Well, that is crazy. Hey, another thing I know. So when the mold comes in,
Yep.
no, hang on. We've been talking about the mycotoxin mainly, but you can get mold growing inside you, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, because mold
yeah.
can colonise inside. And the one thing I noticed with the mouldy people, the mouldy ones, they're in their sinus. When they talk about sinus, they would describe it like they always have sinus congestion, but it's not really productive.
Yeah.
They're not the people with the watery dripping. I mean, they'll always have histamine reactions or something, and that happens occasionally, and they'll say, oh, when the seasons change. Most of the time, they'll complain about a straight-out congestion and almost like a swelling.
Yeah.
And then you see the pictures under the microscope of what the mold does when it colonises a mucosa. It actually embeds into those membranes. I love that stuff. And then what they do then, this is the crazy thing, because like I said, they're too big for the immune system to engulf and remove. So the body tries to do a chemical attack that contributes to all this inflammation and these T-alpha-17 responses, and that just indiscriminate blast the membranes or blast inflammation everywhere. But the other little problem is it keeps priming their histamine reactions. They keep getting a lot more sneezing. They keep getting a lot more hay fever, but it's just congestion. And you
Yeah.
talk to them, and sometimes they'll describe a colour that'll come out like mold. What about lungs? It can go down into the lungs, hey, and
Yeah.
colonise.
Absolutely.
And then what happens is the way it colonises and moves is it shoots these little spores, and the spores are just eggs. Okay, so but what's amazing about them? These spores, a lot of these really stubborn fungi and mold, they got this polysaccharide shell, this amazing tough shell. So what happens? Normally, your immune cells will find this spore or bacteria or virus. It'll engulf it and remove it through phagocytosis. And then what they do is they poison it and they blast it with chemicals to break up the shell, and that's supposed to kill it. These little buggers don't die. So what happens is that the actual immune cells bring them into the body, they get into the lymphatic system, the spores can come out.
Yeah, they travel.
It's crazy. Hey, and they can translocate.
Yeah.
There's a lot of data looking at now. Can they translocate to the joints? Can they translocate to the brain?
Yeah.
Can they do all of these weird things? But if we think about the lymphatic system in our body, we've mentioned the mesenteric adenitis and other lymph node swollen issues, and even maybe tonsillitis, adenitis could be a lot of mold. But the lymphatic system in the brain could be another place.
Yes.
All that water flushing through the brain. So the lymph of the brain, is that? Do you think we could be getting stuff into there, releasing?
Oh,
Does it release
undoubtedly.
mycotoxins? Like
Well,
once
it-
it's in your body?
It upsets your biochemistry in your brains. That's why you get. That's why you get. Dopamine problems such as.
But is that a
Asperger's.
survivor response induced by the mucosal immunity, or are we having a translocated,
Really
moldy
good
brain?
question. I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's a survivor response or just a side effect of the
Yeah.
toxins. It's a little bit scary. It's funny you mentioned the sinus and all that sort of thing. You know which type of mold causes the worst sinus congestion? You're not going to believe this. Penicillium.
Oh, the one they used to treat sinus infections.
Different species, but penicillium is a very powerful
Yeah.
irritant in the body.
And that is actually the one that's most constant, associated with tonsillitis and that mesenteric adenitis.
Yeah, and it does
Yeah.
cause gut issues too.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of people who say they're allergic to penicillin. You ever heard that saying?
I have.
Yeah, and that's because the type of penicillin they use medicinally is very similar to the one you find in your furniture at home.
You know when people say, I'm allergic to sulfur?
Yeah,
And I'll say, what does that mean? And they said, I took an antibiotic once. Is that what you're talking about as
yeah.
well?
There are sulfur-based
Yeah,
drugs
that's
like
not-
sulfasalazine is
Yeah.
a drug,
Yeah.
and penicillin sulfur-based.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Righto.
So it's and sulfur itself you use for bathing, but penicillin's the classic one that causes nasal irritation.
So,
Yeah.
mate, to me, like I'm hearing what we're saying here. So, and like I said, I'm imagining Stranger Things now. Because no, seriously, this stuff all over the walls. So imagine, like, I mean, this is what we're talking about. So this stuff could be everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is.
It is everywhere.
It is everywhere.
Yep.
And let's say when we're immune compromised, the little buggers can come in and live. If
Yeah.
we've got a strong immune system and a good mucosal immunity, we can protect ourselves from it.
Yeah.
If we've
Yep.
got really good hygiene throughout our house and we're making sure we're not. See, I know we have podcasts previously called the hygiene hypothesis.
Mm-hmm.
So what do we do? Do we sterilize these things, or do we? Come on, how what do we do?
How to treat it is relatively simple, which is keeping the joint dry. So keeping the
Yes.
windows open,
Yeah.
keeping the house aerated throughout the days, and
Yep.
keeping it light.
Yeah,
Sunlight.
and get the
Yeah.
sunshine.
Airing the mattresses, airing
Yeah.
the towels and the
Yeah.
pillows and stuff.
And not
which
just when
is-
I wet the bed. No, it's,
No.
This is a daily
Yeah.
sort of thing. So you got to go through, get it out, you got to clean, and look for other things. I grew up major problems with asthma. All right, always a real sick kid, really sick kid. We had these. I I should have googled it to find out what the hell it was. But you know how they weave mats? They make woven mats and hats and baskets. Well, that was what my floor was made of. All these little squares of woven, like.
Right.
I don't know what the hell. I wish I'd Googled this before. It's got a word for it. But that was all just mold contaminated stuff. It was like a compost as a carpet. We ripped that up, my asthma significantly improved.
Yeah.
So look around your house and see if there's things like that might be holding it, areas that are holding moisture and water that aren't getting
Yep.
any sun that you might need to blast with something. Have a look at the carpets, have a look at your mattresses, see how old
Yeah.
everything is. But you should be able to smell it, huh?
Well, not if people are very sensitive to
Yeah.
mold, they are like mold detectors.
How else do I
so
know
they
if it's in my house, apart from seeing it?
There is a service you can get from it's called House Hygiene Services
Yeah.
or something. I can't remember the name of the company, but they come around and check for mold properly.
Really?
Yeah,
They can measure
I
it.
can't
They can
remember her
measure it
name,
in
but
the
she's-
air.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And other important areas, because we're thinking always of inside the house. But I've had clients where it's in the gutter, so it's all the leaves in the
Yeah,
gutters.
yeah.
They have lots of trees around the house, which means there's
Yeah.
no sunshine
Moisture.
and it's a lot of moisture.
And compost. And,
So it's a lot of those mold spores that goes through the window.
Yeah.
Goes through the windows. Air conditioning systems,
potting mix.
yeah.
big ones.
Sitting there with a potting mix and everything
Yeah,
like that. You
of
can
course.
always smell it and see it. That's
Yeah.
crazy. So we can get exposure. So in my house, in a house, if we were to burn, I reckon burning that myrrh and the frankincense regularly, like getting that, and the burning of the myrrh. Like, I mean, we got that product Resilience that's got the myrrh and the frankincense
yeah.
and reishi mushroom, which has also been shown to be really good for it. So you can take that to treat internally and maybe create an environment so they're less likely, but you're not going to stop the inhalants and that stuff coming through with those herbs. So we need to kill stuff that coats the walls and sterilise the carpets and have all that sort of stuff. But we don't really want to be doing it with really harsh, aggressive antimicrobials that are indiscriminately kill everything. That's why I really like herbs. They're a little bit different to then just killing bacteria.
And mold, as I said, 25%. It's on 25% of the biomass. Crazy stat. 100,000 different species of fungal things. So some are good, some are bad.
Yeah.
Some will kill you. Some will keep you alive forever.
Yeah.
Incredible. And you got to remember the problem with this stuff too is it disrupts our gut dysbiosis.
Yeah.
You got to remember because this was the great discovery in 1928 when Fleming accidentally contaminated his petri dish that had bacteria on it, streptococcal bacteria, and he accidentally got some penicillin mold on it, and it killed. They called a ring, a little drop, and it killed it all around it.
Yeah.
It killed the streptococcal. Now,
That's how they did it.
That's how he accidentally did it.
Oh, that's so cool.
And of course, they never actually clinically trialed it because it was so effective. They gave it to a policeman when they first developed enough, because it's very difficult to grow penicillin.
Yeah.
They called it mold juice, by the way, in the old days.
Oh, good stuff.
And they gave it to a guy who was dying of a septicemia, a bacterial infection of the blood, and he came alive and completely cured, and then they ran out of penicillin and he died. But then, of course, the major push was World War II, was to make it to mass production.
Yeah.
And by the end of World War II, during D-Day, near the end of World War II, they had enough to keep the troops alive from all the bacterial infections, which was one of the reasons why they won the Second World War. On penicillin's back. Because you got to remember, if you got a cut and a bacterial infection, you just died. You got gonorrhea, you just died. Strep, you got really sick and died. And so that was the end of it. Now you had a absolute cure.
Yeah, that's crazy, huh?
Crazy. And they made it by bubbling purified water through corns and to make, because you can't just grow it in petri dish, you have to make tons of it. So now it's in mass production, and of course it's become very ineffective nowadays. But back in those days, it was incredibly effective medicine.
Yeah, wow.
No trials have actually been done on penicillin because it was so effective.
That is crazy.
It just cured people.
That's funny. And then the other most commonly prescribed drug was the statins, which was made resembling the red yeast rice.
Well, it's more than resembling it. Lovastatin is the same compound. But the bad thing is when you take that chemical on its own, it's quite dangerous. Has side effects. But when you take the red yeast rice that's been eaten since 300 BC or something, the last I looked up, there's no side effects.
Yeah, and most of the Peking duck stuff now is not red yeast rice, it's just red food colouring.
Oh, yeah.
So we're not getting those benefits.
I know, and same with eating oyster mushrooms. You ever eaten them from Coles?
I love them.
Well, you're on Lovastatin.
It's true.
2.6% of it by weight is Lovastatin.
Really? 2.6% of an oyster mushroom by weight
Lovastatin.
That is full on.
So if you have 100 grams, which is not unusual, is it?
No.
So that's 2.6 grams of
They're also a good
Lovastatin.
source of vitamin D, aren't they?
Oyster
mushrooms.
There's a source of
Oyster
vitamin D.
mushrooms are really good. I'm positive they're a good source of D, and then that's also one of the side effects of the Lovastatin. Normally, you don't make D.
Because
that's interesting.
Because cholesterol's made from D.
Nature's cool. It gives you the thing.
It does because cholesterol turns into vitamin D, and so you got to remember these food/fungi. These drugs are huge, and they are good for secondary prevention of heart disease, not for primary prevention. So. Yeah. There was another study, I've got it here, that showed that basically if you take it to prevent a heart attack, your first one, it doesn't work.
Yeah, right.
But it's only good for secondary prevention. So if you had a heart attack, it can be useful. So, but if you have the oyster, mushrooms or that sort of thing, you're actually getting a drug and the red yeast rice without the side effects. And I've got it's too long to read.
Like Peking duck and oyster mushrooms. That's better than the statin. That's like the original statin protocol.
Yeah, and here's a paper published last year on the therapeutic properties of oyster mushroom, and it also improves your diabetes. Now, statins make diabetes worse.
Well, that's
but this improves diabetics.
Huh.
And it reduces inflammation.
That is
and
so
it helps
cool.
muscle function. Had no side effects on liver and kidney, yet the statin drug has all those side effects, including muscles. Stuffing up your muscles. In fact, it was a drug. One of the statins was banned because it increased rhabdomyolysis by, you're gonna love this figure, 8,000%.
Wow.
Over the other statins.
Well,
so
it
just
even hit the neighbour.
Just
holy hell,
horrendous side effects.
That is.
For example, if you
unless you go back and complain of it, and they'll say it's got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, you know, like
do work.
Yeah,
like
they do.
going back to red yeast rice, if you take that with berberine in one state, it improved insulin resistance, glucose, lipids.
Take what with
Peop-
berberine?
Red yeast rice.
Yeah, right.
You know, and so it's very, very beneficial for your liver. It's great for angiotensin 2 levels, so great for your kidneys.
Berberine's another one of those ones for that mucosal immunity and breaking
Yep.
up the biofilm. And
Antioxidants, really, really good stuff. I mean, and that's what nature's all about.
Yeah.
You take the mold or fungus or yeast, whatever, in its natural form,
Yeah.
and it can be very
well, it
beneficial.
is natural. I mean,
Yeah.
if we have what we've learned from the probiotic market as well is you can use a strain as competitive exclusion to prevent another strain. I was looking for which probiotics might prevent. The only one that comes through is some decent data was a Saccharomyces again, the Saccharomyces
yeah.
boulardii,
Yeah.
which makes sense as a colonizing yeast, you know, because it'll actually compete to a certain degree with
Yeah.
other fungi and molds. It's more on that
Yeah.
side
Yeah.
of the immunity.
You know, so statins typically work by knocking out, you know, this enzyme here, of course.
Yeah.
And I'll hold it up the camera there.
HMG
But
CoA reductase.
That's it. And of course, that if you take that with the food, you still get that inhibition, but you get the beneficial side effects of the food.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. Eh?
I mean, I priced them at Coles, $5 for a packet of the oyster mushrooms,
Yeah, right.
which will give you a dose of, you know, very good dose
Yeah.
of lovastatin, and it's not toxic
I
at that
love
level.
them too.
Yeah, they're yummy.
Yeah, they are
Yeah.
good ones, man. I'm a
You
mushroom.
got to remember the first Japanese doctor that was looking into all this sort of stuff. He was first. He first
Aren't
extracted
mushrooms
from
mold
mushroom.
and fungi?
Yeah. Oh no. You see what I mean? They're good and bad.
Are they going to grow inside me?
Probably not the tree mushrooms. I don't think they will. I think
The only
they'll
reason why I said that, how many, you know, when people used to come in for an anti-candida diet and they're told they can't eat mushrooms?
I know.
Oh,
And I go,
I know,
why?
I don't
And they
know
say,
where
I've
that
got a problem
comes
with
from.
fungus.
yeah.
It's just like,
Someone started a rumor there, and then it just
just
seemed
goes
to
around,
became like
hey?
a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's crazy, isn't it? So you know these things are
because
good.
other mushrooms, so reishi mushroom, again, is really good at knocking this little sucker off. And you're saying oyster mushroom's really good for us as well.
Oh,
the
yeah.
other things, so you talked about flavonols and that sort of stuff before.
Yeah.
There's a heap of data on luteolin as well and quercetin.
Yeah.
And now luteolin and quercetin, they're always used as to inhibit histamine release, like good anti-allergy, good anti-inflammatories, really good at blocking off the release of these inflammatory compounds, not just blocking histamine receptors. So actually go to stabilise the mast cells, stabilise the immune system, work on that mucosal immunity. Interestingly, we mentioned before the liberation of nutrients, hormones and everything that could be associated with this. Both quercetin and luteolin, very powerful estrogen receptor blockers as well. And you see in nature, you see these little patterns where it's got multiple functions on the one thing. Luteolin and quercetin, you get in a lot of the luteolin's excellent from Perilla frutescens and that sort of stuff, which is one of my favourite sources because it's one I can remember. And then also you'll find a lot of these other things in the peels and the skins and the outer leaves of all your herbs.
And the
But you've got to get
vegetables have to be
fresh.
fresh,
So you
yeah.
get them out of all your salads, you get them out of your apple peels, all that sort of stuff. But it's got to be fresh because they're the exact places where you get the mould if it's not fresh.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's why they're there.
Could
course.
be.
See,
Because
nature's so smart. Eh?
Yeah, because
Smart.
we said that the flavonoids, if the flavonoids are there, then the mold doesn't inhibit the detoxification process.
Yeah.
So yeah, like nature just has it figured out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so clever, eh?
It is clever because, you know, like, I mean, when you eat them, I'm not being biased here. If you take red yeast rice or one of those other molds, compare it to the drugs, it works better because it has a plethora. The side effects are beneficial. You know,
Yeah.
they help your kidneys, help your
Beneficial.
liver. Beneficial.
I like the way you say that.
Yes, I kind of split it out a bit like that. So you know, this is where lovastatin came from.
Yeah.
And if you take it in a natural
Is that
state,
also beneficial?
it's very beneficial.
What, lovastatin?
Lovastatin. Well, if it's in the red yeast rice.
Now, so we clean the house.
Yes.
Yes.
We flush everything out.
Leave the windows open.
Maybe we can load up on some Saccharomyces boulardii. If we're going to take a probiotic to colonise our mucosa, it may as
Yeah.
well be the one that may block it a bit.
Yep.
We need to have lots of flavonoids already in
Yep.
because you can't wait until you're fully loaded up because it won't work. So we drink lots of good coffee. Is that what you said? I'm sure you
Yeah.
said that.
Polyphenols.
The polyphenols in coffee
Yeah.
was protective. That's right.
Polyphenols in coffee. We talked about all those other, the frankincense, the reishi, the myrrh. They're all things that we can do to protect against the mold.
Yep.
But most of it's looking at your environment, surely.
Yeah.
And
Most of it is definitely environment. And something else is also avoiding gluten if you haven't done so yet.
Yeah.
We found a lot of anti-gliadin antibodies in
Yeah.
people who are susceptible to mold biotoxin illness. And part of that is because a lot of people who are very susceptible to mold biotoxin issues have the celiac genes, the HLA.
B27
DRDQ genes.
The
the doctor one.
DRDQ.
Doctor 2 and Doctor 4, Doctor
That's
6.
right.
Yeah.
And so that's one aspect. The other aspect is also that mold biotoxins will decrease a neuropeptide called MSH, which I think is melanocyte-stimulating hormone.
Yeah, it is.
If I'm right. And MSH is the compound that protects our mucous membranes. It's our first line of defense. So if that's not there, then we get the gut dysbiosis, we
Yep.
get the leaky gut, the leaky cells, leaky blood-brain barrier,
Yep.
and that's going to make any gluten issues worse as well. So they find that
But
a lot
gluten
of...
does that as well, doesn't it? So gluten itself, via the zonulin and the
That's
tight junction
right.
proteins, will do the leaky gut wall, even if you're not celiac
Yeah.
or a mad cow. You just get the gluten will go through, open up the pathways in your gut and your brain.
Yeah.
Is that how you get more exposure? to
Yeah,
the
I guess you
stuff?
get more exposure, you get more of those proteins like being transferred from the gut environment into the blood environment. It'll just make an immune response
So
worse.
having a leaky gut wall, those people that are, constantly having some sort of inflammation in through the gut or deficient in nutrients like zincs and that sort of stuff, they get intestinal permeability. You're going to react so much worse.
Yes, yeah.
And we know that they have more allergies and more infections.
Yeah.
I just didn't. I've never really looked enough at mold, even though I've had some really full-on cases in my clinic. But I think it was because of that. Really early, I had some really full-on ones. They were full-on infections, and anything less than that, I'm thinking, nah.
Well, it wasn't it's only recently that it's actually
Yeah.
gotten more recognition or we're more aware of it.
Yeah.
You're right. Like 20 years ago, it had to be a very clear mold case for us to even look
But
at
we
it.
never had air cons in school. We didn't have air
No.
conditioners everywhere in those days either. Like I was telling Steve-O before, the reason why I had that stuff over the floor, because growing up in North Queensland, most of us houses have gaps between the floorboards to let the breeze through.
Yes.
Because most of the time it's hot. So then in
Yes.
a couple of weeks of winter, you use a blanket.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think. What about this sick building syndrome? Maybe the overpopulation density. Everything's dark.
Yep.
Like I go to Sydney, even as Sydney's a very small, probably city in the big scheme of things.
Yeah.
But when I'm in Sydney, it's always so dark.
Yeah.
Like it's so dark between all the Sydney. Everywhere, it's always dark.
That's right.
So
And there's certain areas, like I know, because I go to the US a lot and treat people there. And depending on which areas you're in, like I know that in North Carolina, where I go quite a bit, the houses there have the attics and they have the basements,
yeah.
and it gets very, very moldy in those kinds of conditions.
Yeah.
And so in a sense, the Queenslanders are actually really good because they have the airflow, unless you build it
sunlight.
up
Yeah.
and all of that. So yeah, it's definitely depending on the environment and things like
Yeah.
that you live in.
It's quite amazing because there's the top 11 sources of indoor air pollutants here, and the top one is mold and
Oh, there you
bacteria.
go.
Oh, there you
Yeah.
go.
And then you've got things like furnishing materials, chemical fumes, chemical from cleaning products, outdoor air pollutants that come inside, obviously, cigarette smoke, animal hair, dust mites, combustion gases, carbon monoxide, quite dangerous one, and gases like radon and from
And number 12 is Grant Corby's visited.
Oh, yes.
The stench. Oh, that ain't no mycotoxin.
He's on quite a high protein diet, isn't he?
High protein, high sulfur.
Yes.
high
God.
Ooh,
methane.
that's not a good.
Oh,
combination.
God.
I think he actually eats farts. It's just it's the only way I can explain it. He must directly eat fart and release fart.
And here's the crazy thing about mold and that sort of thing. If it's living all over us anyway, and it is living on us, it can be a symbiote too. It can be just there and be healthy for us. Like
Like it commends it, like make a coating and stop others coming in.
Yeah, and it can affect really adversely. If it, like Propionibacterium acne, it causes acne, the bacteria. It lives on everybody's skin. Everybody, all the time.
Yeah.
And it becomes a problem when you have surgery because you cut open the skin and the P. acne gets in there and causes. That's one of the most common infections you get
Is there
in
any,
hospitals.
apart from the penicillin and the statins and that, and the reduced rice, I suppose, is there any other, do you guys know of any other traditional,
Yes.
like Shilajit could be another example of where we might supplement with certain mould, because Shilajit's basically compost
Yeah.
and postbiotic compounds, that dirt from the hip. What were you going to say? Is there,
Oh, were you looking for more things to help?
yeah, no, I was looking, I was just curious. My brain was leaping to was, is there any probiotic forms of mould? Yeah, is there any form of
There's
mould that
digestive
we
enzymes.
can have good ones inside us?
Well, there's good foods that are molds.
Yeah.
You know, there's plenty of mushrooms that are
Like if I
healthy
eat
for
my
you.
blue cheeses.
Got to be careful how I say that. The shiitake mushroom is a good one.
I call them
Yeah.
shit cakes.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
that's
taste
right.
like shit cakes.
Yeah. They're not very flavourful, in my
Oh, they're
opinion.
very flavour. They bloody taste like shit cakes. They're
Yeah, Beck likes them.
horrible. Slimy, bloody ball
Oh,
of things.
don't. Oof.
Anywho, they're very good for you.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, I was going to say, because we are talking about food and all of that kind of stuff, there are actually some foods that protects us against the carcinogenic effects of aflatoxins, because aflatoxins can be very carcinogenic. And apparently, carrots, parsnips, parsley, and celery will actually
Really?
protect us against the carcinogenic
Perfect.
effects of aflatoxins.
So, what's some examples of aflatoxins? Is that that's what,
That's
the
from
peanuts and all that sort of
yeah,
stuff?
peanuts. It's mainly food exposure.
Yeah,
So that-
legumes and nuts
yeah,
and especially
grapes,
not fresh stuff and
lots of
rices and that.
fruits and stuff
Yeah.
like that. That's where we get it, and very can definitely be very very.
So there was
damaging.
parsnips, parsley, celery.
and carrots.
Carrots.
So a lot of the stuff that you'd put in soups and stuff.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
Well-
that's cool. And a lot of stuff that's around at the moment. We get, I get one of those weekly deliveries of random vegetables. Yeah, they come each
Yeah,
week, whatever's
yeah.
in season. It's carrot season. Oh man, so much. I'm pretty much. Not only am I seeing in the dark, but I'm glowing in the dark. You're nailing them. But anywho, carrot and
gosh.
bloody kale. I
That's
think our whole
awesome.
box is full of carrot and kale.
Yeah.
Anywho,
God. Now, well, Elizabeth, you got some great results there. That
Oh,
you,
yes.
I really want to see these. The before and after photo. Yeah, you see the before and after photos. Someone's ugly and then they're beautiful
That's
or whatever.
right.
I want to see the ugly and the beautiful in the
Right.
results.
So unfortunately, my printer is not a color printer, so
Oh,
it's not
no.
as clear as what I wanted it to be. But I've got the name of the test results, and as you can see on this one, the ochratoxin is quite high, which is the second one from the top. So you'll see like it's a black bar that sort of shows that. I think with this one also we had some aflatoxin and we had some gliotoxin there. And then on the second page we had very high levels of, and I can't pronounce this, Gitomium globosum, which is
sounds fantastic. I think my
So-
glass just lifted off the table
Yeah.
when you said that.
it's this one
Cabosum
here.
leviosum.
It's this here at the bottom.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
see the
look how
levels
high it
are
is.
457 and it should be 20 to 80.
Yeah, that's incredible, isn't it?
So really high
Moldy
levels.
bugger.
So we used natural stuff
Yeah.
for this lady. So not not a lot of the medication treatments. And we tested it, and there's still a little bit of work for us to do, but you can see the ochratoxin has lowered a lot.
Good.
The aflatoxin is gone. We had this one appear a little bit, which I'm not quite sure why. But the
Microphone,
gliotoxin is gone as well.
Yep.
And then also the Chiatomium globosum is completely gone as well.
That's
so
awesome,
a little
yeah.
bit more things to do, but that is all through natural
And
treatments.
what time frame?
That was within 4 months.
Yeah, wow.
That's good, eh?
That was crazy, yeah. That case of mine with that pulmonary hemosiderosis, we fixed up a lot of the weird, really acute, aggressive stuff really quickly. Years later, that other stuff would have been going around.
Yeah.
But you can break the cycle relatively quickly, but to get a resolution like that's pretty impressive. Now, you said you treated it naturally. What sort of thing did you do?
Well, obviously you have to, because remember that mold biotoxins, they disrupt the whole detoxification process.
Yeah.
So you want to support detoxification, so I used things like glutathione and things like
So
that.
you support it. So when we talk
Support
about NRF2 activators, NRF2, when they activated, that's like a gene activator to say, man, we're in trouble. We need to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And then it induces anti-inflammatory and antioxidant protective mechanisms and that sort of stuff. And it upregulates our detoxification pathways like glutathione and glucuronidation and that sort of stuff. So when you said before these molds come in, you don't get the NRF2 activation necessarily. So we really got to support that. So you use so when you support a detoxification process, you'd use some stuff to activate the NRF2, but at the same time you'd support the substrates or the nutrients needed for NRF2 to
That's
be
right.
possible.
Yes.
So that's where you support the glutathionation and those sort of other
Glucuronidation. So all the phase 2 liver detoxification processes, you support that. You get binders in. And there's a variety of binders on the market that you can choose from. I know in the traditional medical model they use the cholestyramine, but that can have some side effects.
Yep.
So you use binders because you need binders to bind to those mold the
So
mycotoxins.
binders, so we're talking about like zeolite. So what about charcoals or
Yeah.
clay?
You
and
can
that
use
sort
any
stuff?
of those. Like some
Yep.
people like to use the bentonite clay,
Yep.
some will like to use the zeolite clay, some will like to use the charcoals.
Yep.
I think even modified citrospectin is another one that some people like to
Yeah,
use.
yeah, right.
So as long as you use a binder,
Yeah.
and then support like the NRF2 receptors as we talked about with using DIM,
Yep.
and things like that. So obviously there was other stuff going on for this lady as well, but we just supported all of that, and that improved it. Because one of the things
And
you
what
have
about
to
the
be-
house? Like, did you go and do you give them a whole heap of instructions to open the
Yes.
windows and stuff?
Yeah, she was convinced there was no mold, but I said
Yeah.
to her, go look here, go look here, go look here,
Yeah.
go look here, and she found it. And they've subsequently, removed the mold in the house. Because sometimes it's as simple as just ripping up a carpet.
Yeah.
Or you find it underneath the pillows or underneath the mattresses. You just have to go and look for it.
Yeah.
And so she found it, and
I'm freaking out a little
and
bit.
the
here.
interesting thing is, she said she would never have thought. Now
Yeah.
it's like everything makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of doing that. But one of the things that you have to be careful with in terms of treating mold or detoxing mold, so to speak, is you just have to remember that if you start mobilizing mold or mycotoxins, I should say, out of the body, as it moves from the tissues into the bloodstream, and you have a lower level of mycotoxin in the tissue and high levels of it in the blood, it will trigger those immune inflammatory
Yeah,
responses. And that's
yeah.
often why people feel a lot worse.
Yeah,
When you
okay.
start, there's ways of getting around that, but that's one of the things that one
And
really
it'll be
has to look out
systemic.
for.
I mean, it's in your blood, so that you almost feel septic. Hey, you get generalized fatigue and inflammatory sort of stuff, and weird things like acute phase responses by the liver. You
Yeah.
get sticky, shitty circulation. And
That's
that.
right. You get the coagulation or because this is how mold biotoxins can work. It can go either way. It can increase coagulation,
Yeah.
and it can also decrease coagulation, where you get more of the bleeding from the mucus
And the
membranes
lymphatic
as well.
burden, all the lymph. So all that extracellular fluid and all that lymph just.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
There are 6 things you can do to get rid of mold out of your
6?
house. Yes, or 7 actually. The 7th one. First one is getting rid of moisture.
All right.
And you can do that by, of course, increasing sunlight. So during the days like today, here's fine on the Gold Coast, windows open,
Yeah.
air going through. Mold spores, clear them up, and you can clear them up with other things, but basically you can use a low pH substance like vinegar, half water. Food source, make sure your food source is, there's no sort
Fresh
of,
and clean.
yeah, that sort of thing. Oxygen, a steady supply of oxygen, a vital part of growth. So make sure that everything's aired out. That's the most important thing.
Yeah,
An
okay.
optimal temperature. So make sure there's diversity in temperature within your house. A lot of people leave a thermostat on all day
Yeah.
and just keep the temperature of a house like this. Make sure it goes like that, because mold, dies at extreme temperatures.
Okay.
So make sure your house heats up and
Hey, you
cools
said
down.
extreme acid and that, acid will kill it too.
Yeah, acid
Things
kills
like, is that what, we wouldn't get too much mold, we shouldn't get mold out of things like the kimchis and the sauerkrauts and
Yeah.
all that sort of stuff, eh? Because
Probably
the
not.
acid should
Probably
be
acid, yeah.
killing it all off.
It
or
should
something
be,
like
unless you
that.
make it yourself. I used to make my own sauerkraut, and
Yeah.
sometimes I'd let it sit a little bit too long in the
Yeah.
Queensland heat, and you'd get the mold growing on top.
Yeah.
My wife's invest probably had a little bit of mold in it somewhere in there with the vinegar and
Yeah.
face mask, and it was dark. The house was dark and everything, and I said, "You got to open up the windows." No, and so it's like, but I went there and cleared out the mold, and so I used a low pH. Hasn't come back at all.
Yeah.
Just vinegar through pH of 3, that kills it.
Yeah,
Right.
right.
It won't rot your hands away, of course. Just don't get it in your eyes. It's quite stingy, but just you don't need gloves or anything.
It's
Vinegar.
nice on fish and chips too.
It's that too.
I've gone that way. I've moved away from the tomato sauce back to the vinegar with my fish and chips.
Yeah.
Yeah, and where you're from, you can
I
put it on
love
your
it.
stingers
It's old
too,
school,
mate.
eh?
When you get stung with the jellyfish up near Mackay.
Yeah.
There you go. Lots of benefits.
Most of the
vinegar.
time, we used to do that. We always go fishing on time. We'd always take the vinegar in case we get stung by a box jellyfish or
Does that
something.
really work? Because there's
No idea. Never used it.
Okay.
But what we
It
used to
does.
do is we used to always get stuck because a car or boat would break down and we'd end up being stuck somewhere. But we used to just marinate our bait and in the vinegar and eat it
Yeah.
when we were really hungry.
Marinate
never-
the bait.
Oh, mate, when you were
But the
hungry,
bait would be
it's
raw, would
amazing.
it?
Yep.
But
And then you put it in the
acids cook
vinegar and cook it.
Yeah. You can cook kingfish.
That's my survival tip.
In,
Anyone that's in North Queensland stuck in a boat, you're going to have vinegar there.
Acids cook things.
Should be able to catch a fish.
They don't
Yeah,
cook
I know.
it.
Like I put acid on a lot of the
Apparently
raw
piss on
meat
it.
before I before I cook it, and yeah, it almost browns the
Tenderises
Yeah.
meat instantaneously.
Oh man, have you guys ever? My wife listens to this podcast. She hates me when I say this, and I say it all the time. To piss her
There
off.
we go.
Have you ever done kiwi fruit in a marinade? You gotta marinate your meat with kiwi fruit. I'm serious. I'm not even joking.
No, you're right, and I think
I know,
even
yeah,
pineapple as well. So
Yeah.
any of those acidic fruits,
And
you
it eats
can.
the gristle. But you can't do it for too long. I put a whole topside roast in this thing, and I left it for like half an hour because you're only
What,
supposed to do it for like
just
10
liquid?
minutes or something. Then I went to pick it up to turn it and just fully broke in half.
Wow.
Like it just digests out
Wow.
all the gristle, and then you cook it, and it's so tender.
So mold, it's good, it's bad, it's ugly, it's harmless. This is what we've talked about today. If it's in your house, it's bad. Okay? If you take it as a drug, it can be good. If it's lying in your garden, it could be innocuous. So this is the mystery of mold. But once it gets in you and causes harm, it causes major problems. That's what today's
Yeah.
message is all about. So,
Very
It
common.
is.
incredibly common. So, but that's all we've got time for, guys. We have gone a bit over time, actually.
Oh, whinge.
Whinge.
That's Brooko's fault with her inappropriate comments about the kiwi fruit.
Yes. Yeah, that's it. So, Elizabeth,
But
you had
thanks for
fun
having
today. You've laughed today a bit.
Oh, absolutely. I'm starting to get into the whole.
Banter, apparently.
That's
it's called.
right. I think I was a bit serious maybe in the beginning, and I was like, "Oh, right, now I get it.
You can
Yeah.
relax.
I
now.
get it. I'm
Yeah.
supposed to laugh. All right, I get
Oh,
it."
yeah.
I learned a lot today on mold. It's incredible. You
It
know,
was
it
fun.
Seems
I
like
really
a
enjoyed
boring.
it.
I
mold.
think I'm in the upside down. Just personally, I think I'm full of
Well,
mold.
then you should get you tested.
Jeez.
Let's do it. Hey, let's do
Let's
it.
do it.
We'll do it as a little case study and we'll write
do
it
a
up.
little
Let's
case
test
study.
test my mold.
All right, guys. Well, have a good day, and
Yeah.
we're going to be talking about autism down the track, which relates a little bit to mold. So it's a little tiny bit of a segue there. Did you like that?
I did, Steve.
just
It
a
wouldn't be the
fluke.
same without a segue.
Just a fluke.
Right.
But
Master
anyway,
Segway. You know
Yeah,
that's his name.
absolutely.
If he was a superhero, he'd be Master Segway.
Just a segue. All right, we'll say goodbye to everyone.
Bye,
Bye
everyone.
from Master Segway.
Bye-bye.
See you guys.